Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you've all had a great Christmas and looking forward to a happy new year. I'm here with my pal and fellow delinquent, JP. How are you doing, JP? How was your Christmas?
Christmas was great, Cinny. I'm glad to be here. This new feature of ours. Let's give the people what they deserve.
Brilliant. So here we are, Johnny. We're going to review the class of 2023, the Forgotten Generation. Are you excited to review all of those that we've put in?
Yeah, this is going to be a great addition to what we've been doing. I think looking back on who we've selected and who we've put in, I think we've got it right so far. It's just the same. It started now when it should have been started 30 years ago.
Yeah, so how did we come up with the idea? I can't remember how we came up with the idea for this. Just want everybody to know. I think we were just having a general chat, weren't we?
If I remember rightly, we did a speculation that the team that we played in during our time was mocked. So we wanted to show our respect of the ones before us. And then we started this.
Brilliant. So let's get into it. Can I say the first inductee was Sir Philip Craven? What can you say? Anything about Phil that was special?
He is by far the most highly ranked name, not just in our British sport of wheelchair basketball, but globally. What an icon, what a legend. And to put him in first, well, that was our honour. And I think we upheld it really well.
Great. So Phil Craven was one of our first inductees. Then we inducted Cass Walton, OBE. Great choice. I think it was a fantastic choice.
Yeah, when we did the research on Cass, hearing about her importance at the very women's wheelchair basketball, it was a no-brainer we put her in because obviously from the day when it started, women's basketball, to where it is today, it wouldn't have got to where it was if it wasn't for people like Cass. So she was a great addition to add in.
Our next one was Josie Tchaikovsky. What about her? I remember her. Fantastic for the kids. She done so much for the game of wheelchair basketball and the juniors. Did she bring you up, John? Or did she have a hand?
No, she never brought me up, but we crossed paths many times at the beginning of my career, especially in the third division. I started out in the third division. But her work with not just the kids, but the game and the women's team. I mean, she was even captain of the Great Britain women at one point. True leader, an inspirational figure to women's basketball. It was great to put Joe in.
Wasn't she a multi-eventer? Did she do other sports? I'm sure she done track.
Yeah, I think she also won the London Marathon. She either won it or she participated. I'm sure she won it, the London Marathon.
Brilliant, brilliant. The next one we're entering was Nigel Smith. Now, I know Nige a long time. I played for his team at Milton Keynes Aces, and he just had a brilliant brain. He was way ahead of our generation, way ahead of him. What do you know about Nige, John?
Well, I know Nige was part of the team I wanted to get in when he was part of the 94-96 team. But then when he went to coaching, that was when you realised what brain he had. He realised the current regime was coming to the end of its tether, and he was prepared to, shake some feathers and get the new kids coming through. And he did it. And he did it where it kept GB in the world elite. So he was a great guy. One of the best minds. Don't forget, he was the first one to bring in the video analysis for us.
Yeah, and
he was awesome.
I think he was the founder member of the Milton Keynes Aces, and I don't think he played for any other club once he'd founded that. Our next one is Leroy Dobson. And for others outside of this, they would probably want to know why we put Leroy Dobson in. John, give me an insight on why we put Leroy in.
Leroy was a huge, iconic figure domestically. He did play for Great Britain, but he was represented in the Hall of Fame more for what he did at the grassroots, the people he brought into the game. He'd go past people in the street, and say he's got a spare chair, come along and try and things like that. But his character in the game, I'd have to say, comes second to none. I remember him pressing. Oldham Owls pressed his team, and during the press he scored 2 threes back to back. And he turned to the coach of Oldham Owls and said, "Keep the pressure on. I love the pressure."
Yeah, that was typical Leroy. I think if he was coachable, he'd probably be one of the best players in the world of his time as a two-pointer.
Definitely.
Next one, and this took some doing, I bet, John. George Ginger Swindlehurst. How did you find him, or how did we all find him? But especially you.
Well, someone reached out to us who was a distant relative and had a lot of memorabilia of George's, because obviously George and his wife are no longer with us and they never had any kids. And when I picked up the memorabilia to pass on to the National Paralympic Heritage Trust, we had a look through it, read all the history about him and everything, and photos going back to the late 50s, which was an incredible find. Such an inspirational guy. Even guys that are still with us, Phil Craven speaks so highly of him, saying he was probably GB's greatest player. Such an iconic figure to our history of the game.
Tell you what, though, John, I'd like to have seen him, because I heard he was a bruiser and a hell of a player. Our next one, who's not a player, Tony Hooper, referee, GB coach. Why did you select him, John? I know you don't do. Obviously, people are thinking that you select on your own. No, there is a panel that select, but I want to know, what was the insight for Tony Hooper?
I agreed to Tony coming in. He was before my time, but when the delinquent members put it to me, I didn't realise he was such an influential person. That was the main one that got GB Women started, and the history of where women came from to now, unbelievable.
The next one that we inducted, and I always called her our CAF, Catherine Gregory Davis. Tell me a little bit about Cathy.
Oh, she was great. In my early days, Kath was the leader of GB Women. But, at one point she was even my taxi driver, because when I started, I was too young to play. And she'd pick me up and take me to training and whatnot. But watching her play for GB Women, especially in the 1994 World Championships at Stoke, she was the leader of the team. They listened to her. She was the leader. She kept the team spirits high, even when they were losing games. She was a purely iconic figure to women's game. Brilliant lady.
Yeah, she had a different kind of shot, but it was effective. Like it was Kath's own shot, but so effective. She was an iconic figure for the ladies team. Our next inductee was Gordon Perry. What can you tell me about Gordon? What did you love about Gordon?
First time I met Gordon was when he presented the medals at the junior national championships at Stoke, and I was intimidated by the size of the guy. I mean, he was one big bloke, but friendly, always giving advice, and what he did for the sport in our country has never been matched since. Going up and down the country in that van with the GBWBA Roadshow, that's just helped fuel our system to grow. And to be honest, it was a shame when it came to an end, that, because Gordon will go down in history as helping this country get to where it is today, just by doing that.
Yeah, and he done other things. He was the first one to start the London Marathon, I heard. So, you know.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen his Hall of Fame interview, get down there and get it. It's magic. The next inductee was Tony Willard, the gentle giant. Tony, what a player he was. A massive frame. Played way above his points. I always remember Tony, I'm sure you would, John, for the Big 8 when he hit that left-handed layup. Never seen before in the game. Tell me about Tony, your memories of Tony.
I would say it was a left-handed layup. It was fading outside the key. It was a left-handed bank shot. I've never seen anything like it. That iconic moment in British wheelchair basketball history was the thing that changed wheelchair basketball, because people started to use the left hand more. Until then, you only used your strong hand. But Tony's background, coming from the able-bodied game where they use both hands, it was instrumental in that incredible win what was televised.
Our next inductee is John Young. I remember John Young. That was at the start of my career, and I think he was at the end of his career. What a shooter he was. He would come down on the left-hand side and bank it all the time. He never missed. What do you know about John Young? Because you do a lot of the researching about these guys.
Yeah, when I researched on John Young, it was all great info coming in. I mean, I had two people say the same thing, which, means it's more or less gospel, that John Young in one game scored 30 points and never missed a shot. And a record like that, I don't think it still stands today. I don't think anyone will beat a record like that. Absolutely unbelievable. And another thing people said about John Young's shot was, even though it was so great, it was so flat, but somehow went in.
They usually call that shot a line drive.
Well, he was the master then of a line drive.
Our next inductee, and he was well known and called Big John Smith. So it was John Smith. What do you know about John Smith, John?
I played against John in my early days in the 3rd division. Them trips up to Thistle, long drive and whatnot, but he was a great guy to play against. He had that voice of an opera singer, the way he spoke on court, But after the game, what a character. A true iconic figure of the game because of his character. He was such a humble, nice guy. Great asset to GB basketball.
Our next entry, I.W.B.Delinquents. Probably a bit before your time, John. I played a little bit against him before he went off to the States and made a career over there with the Dallas Mavericks. Did you find anything interesting about him when you was researching him?
Yeah, well, obviously, I had heard of him and I had seen clips of him because they did a feature on the Big 8 at one of the halftime intervals of the Big 8 about I.W.B.Delinquents going to play for the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, in them days, it wasn't as common as it is today for British players going playing abroad. So when I read up on him, it was astonishing just to hear what an iconic figure he was. He was let's just say he was a delinquent.
The next one, probably one of my favourites of him, Graham Jumanji Ball. Tell me about Jumanji, aka Graham Ball.
Oh, what a guy. During our time in the national team, he was the 13th man. He was always on the buzz with the team, even though he was doing the photography. Always talking with us, telling us stories. He was just part of the team, even though he was only there as a photographer. He was such a nice gentleman. But even the stories, the story of him breaking his hand and carrying on in a game and being nicknamed the Bionic Carrot because of his ginger hair, just, they were magical stories.
It felt like, like when we was on tour, if he wasn't there, it didn't feel like the team, did it? It was so strange when he wasn't there when we were just doing little tours, but you always knew he'd be there at the majors. We'd have a spot for him.
Yeah, even if we lost and the buzz was silent on the way back to the hotel, he'd start a conversation and, he'd snap out of that bad attitude mood you were in because he'd enlighten you with some facts or something. He was great asset to the team.
So another great character, Gene Stone. And I know Gene for quite a long time. When I was a junior, she told me off quite a bit, and I'm sure, Johnny, you would have some stories about Gene telling you off. What made you put Gene in?
Yeah. Well, when we did the research on Jean, her importance into our sport was up there with the biggest. She was brought into the game by Sir Ludwig Gutmann. And like you, Cinny, I can honestly say I was escorted to Jean's office at Stoke Mandeville once during the Inters, and it was something to do with being drunkard with the Mexican team in the marquee tent. But she was a great lady, a great addition to British wheelchair basketball, and she thoroughly deserved her place in the Hall of Fame.
So our next one, another great icon for wheelchair basketball, Steve Spilker. John, where would we be without Steve?
Well, that's the $1 million question. Where would we be? I don't think we'd be where we are today. He was so instrumental regarding the funding, the way that everything worked, whether it be through the national teams, the international teams. Steve was the figure, and he was so, he was so humble, but in a better way than that. I never seen him angry. I never once seen Steve angry. He always would find a solution or give you advice. He was great. Steve was great.
He was like, John, he always used to work under, do you know when they say you got the iceberg and you could see the top of the iceberg? Steve was the guy that you couldn't see. He got everything right, got everything done. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. He was the base of the iceberg, the bit you couldn't see.
So this character, what a character he was. Known to me, for me, as Daddy Dave Foden. Wow, what a character. Always had a smile on his face. He'd always come up, how you doing, son? And I said, I'm all right, Dad. What was your memories of Dave?
Oh, well, I joined Oldham. It was the second team I joined, Oldham Owls. And at that time, Oldham had 3 teams, one in the third, one in the second, one in the first. And I played with Dave in the third and the second division. And his proper Yorkshire accent was always noticeable on court. But he was another one. Never got flustered, never got angry. He'd have some choice words in his abrupt Yorkshire accent, but Dave was great.
Our next inductee is a tricky character for you, and this inductee, his name is Paul Pollock, aka JP's dad. I know you didn't have a lot to do with putting him in because we left you out of that decision. Tell me about him, not as a dad. Tell me about him as what he done.
Well, he was down as the mechanic, wasn't he? But we all know he did more than that. He was the laundryman, often on the roof of hotels, hanging out the team jerseys to be dried for the next game. He was the one getting the ice for the ice baths. He was huge. People think it was a blessing having your dad there. Sometimes it wasn't, because when you got a hot temper like mine and he can see it coming, he tried to warn the coach, but and warnings sometimes fell on deaf ears, and the outcome was always inevitable.
Yeah, but I remember him on tour every time that he wasn't like your dad. He was just like business. He gets his job done. He treated everybody fairly. He was like all of our dads, to be fair. I remember him, going up on the roof to dry the kit, and he's having a sunbathe. Do you know what I mean? So a great character, an absolutely great character. Our next inductee, Morris Hamilton. Tell me about Morris. What you know about him, John?
Well, I know Morris from being involved with the Sheffield Steelers team. But once we did the research on him, I didn't realise of his importance into the I.W.B.A. at the time. And not just that, he was a IWBF as well. He was a very important man into the world of wheelchair basketball that had just given and given and given. So it was nice for us to give back.
What can I say about this next guy, Mark Cheney? Arguably one of the best shooters and one-pointers to play the game. You played a lot with him, John, and in teams with him. Tell me about this guy's character and how he played the game.
Oh, God, Mark Cheney. He had so many nicknames. The Silent Assassin, the Doctor, you name it, he was the one. He changed the role. If it wasn't him, then maybe the one before him was Phil Craven. But usually, the role of a one-pointer was the curler, the screener, you name it. That changed. The mold changed with Mark Cheney. He spread the scoring. He could easily have a 30-point game, whether it be domestically or internationally. Super, super player.
Our next inductee, and I know her very, very well because I saw her when she first started the game, Anne Wild. What are your memories of Anne?
Well, obviously, I knew Anne more internationally because she was the leader of the women during the period I was involved in the men's team. But she always kept the girls together, even when even when the chips were down and they were struggling in a game or the score wasn't going right. She was the one that was still fighting. She was the one that was still pumped up. She became so big for women's basketball in Britain. The perfect role model, the iconic figure. She thoroughly deserved her place in the Hall of Fame.
She was a pretty feisty character when you played her, though, weren't she? Pretty feisty. I loved her energy and how the way she played the game. Our next character, and I know him well, John, you probably know him well, Ian Laker. Tell me about Ian Laker, the player, the man.
Well, Ian was part of my early days when he was with Hounslow Hurricane Force. Wasn't the best drive going down there. Wasn't even the best game when you came up against him because he was another one. If he had his shooting gloves on that day, he was in trouble. And he was a creator of a shot, drawing the foul, hitting the shot when you didn't think he was going to make it. He was also great for I.W.B.A. When he was vice chairman, I think he was alongside Steve Spilker. I'd say that was when I.W.B.A. were at the best, when we had people who loved the sport and was part of the sport that were in it.
Yeah, Ian was deceptive as a player because, obviously he wasn't. He looked not like a basketball player, but he would blow by you and take a shot, and he would tell you about it. What a great character! Another great addition. Our next one is Ray Cross. So when I first started the game, I saw this guy, and he could do everything. He could create shots. He could shoot the ball. He was like a general. I said, you know what? I want to be like him. What are your memories of Ray?
Well, I don't think it's documented, but Ray Cross and Graham Young were actually the first two coaches of the GB junior team when I was a junior, before other people took it over. They were the ones. And Ray was so good at giving advice. He made the game seem easier than what it was. The way he explained it, the way he spoke to you. He had a basketball mind. His basketball IQ mustn't be matched by anyone. It was up there. He was so intelligent in the game.
Next inductee, Vinnie Ross, also known as Uncle Mince, for those who know him very well. And I think you know him very well, don't you, John Vin?
Oh yeah, I've known Vinny a long time from the beginning. He was the captain at Oldham when I first joined, and he was quite an intimidating guy, to be honest. Because if he got fired up on court, you knew about it. But it was because of his determination. But he wasn't just enrolled in our Hall of Fame for that, was he? He was the first innovator. You think back to the 80s, and he built his first wheelchair in a garage, which then became Chevron and now Da Vinci. Where would wheelchair basketball be without someone like Vince giving us the chairs for like the 88 Seoul Paralympics?
Yeah, I heard you had one of the first.
Yeah, I actually had a prototype one as well when he made a chair with 3 caster pots at the front, so you could either play as a 3-wheel or you could have it as normal with 4.
Fantastic, yeah. Fantastic. Our next inductee, Stevie Kane. For me, probably one of the best players I've ever seen to play the game. Great mind, hell of a 2-point. He played like a 4. Tell me about Stevie, because I know he had a big influence on your career, John.
Yeah, he did. He was a role model and a mentor for me. Stevie was awesome. And even to this day, I never forget the fact that in my first Paralympics in Sydney, and we played in front of 15,000 in that game against USA, the group game, Stevie was so pumped up. But, Stevie happy played good. Stevie angry played great. And he was all fire. Once he was fired up, oh God, he was a magician with the ball. Unbelievable character. Even off the court, he was great. I remember in Sydney, said to me he'd beat me at a game of chess in 4 moves. And we had a bet for $20 and he did it.
That wasn't the best $20 that you spent, was it?
Definitely not.
So that's it. That's our class of 2023. An absolute fabulous cast of people. John, do you think it was worth doing this?
Oh God, yeah. Even if I had to start again tomorrow, I'd start and pick the same people all over again.
And it is difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to pick the people that we want to go in here because there's so many characters. And we know there's some people who think they should be in here. And, unfortunately, right at this moment, they're not. But there's always hope.
Yeah, well, there is hope, but you've got to understand the process. We've got to do the research. And if the research doesn't account to the claim made, or we can't find evidential evidence of, the history, but it's not our fault. The history's being lost. We're trying to save the history now. That's the whole point. But we can't put something in and then someone come back to us and say, well, that's not true. Because then if that's the case, we failed. We're trying to save history. We're not trying to create history fictional.
Yeah, correct. I agree with you there, John. And you're looking forward to the class of 2024? Are we going to take a little break off in January and then come back firing in February? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think with the 4 team, what's going to go in December, we'll let everyone get over their hangovers in January and we'll come back fighting in February. with a special.
Well, John, thank you very, very much for joining me in announcing this. Have a happy new year and say hi to the family and the boys. Thank you very much, John.
All the best.